Okay, yeah. So, right. So you've got your law that you've got in your state, yeah. I'm going to take Ireland, use Ireland as a basis for this because it's a lot easier, yeah. So you've got the 1937 Constitution or whatever like that, and one of the first things it does is one of the first things to sort of kick in after that would be the Companies Act. And in the Companies Act, basically you can create a non-natural human person, which and that is only a son. You know, like in the Christian view of things, it's a son. You think it's genderized? It's not. It's a male, female, child. It's all son. Yeah. In my picture, in the view. Yeah. So. Yeah, so it's a legal person. Now that means that the law has created an alias, yeah? I know the facilitation to create alias, to create, you know, the black dog or the white dog sitting on your shoulder type thing, yeah? So, and it's up to you which one you feed, either the black dog or the white dog, you know. But anyway, you can create these aliases. But also, what happens now is that you've got you've an additional population now. So whatever your population was, straight after this you get another mouth to feed by creating this non-being, yeah. And that feed, what that likes to eat, it likes to eat. And these things exist in perpetuity, yeah. Like I mentioned something, but it likes to eat. You know, after everybody gets its, you know, the money it needs to live and to eat and, you know, to travel to work and back to. After all that has been paid out for by, you know, its own thing that's going on with this non-natural legal person, then the rest of what it gets the scraps, yeah. You know, the non-being gets the scraps, which we call today that profit, yeah. So now the choices that were available, other than going down and picking a non-being as the route, yeah. Let's see, you had the original sole trader, which is John Baker, yeah, the baker. John Baker, and that's it. And he's a baker, and that's what he does. He's a human being, and he is a baker, yeah. But then you create a non-natural human person, John Baker Limited, because it's limited because it has limited liability. So effectively, it can do pretty much anything it wants because it has limited liability. You know, the alias does this, yeah, and this alias needs to talk to another alias, and that's not good. So basically, you have that. So you could have had John Baker, the baker, becomes John Baker Limited, and now John Baker is a representative of that non-natural human person. In fact, John Baker is now the director of that non-natural human person, and by directing, his own being is directed through purpose. Yeah? So you could have had different things. You could have sole trader, co-ops. That was a huge one there. That was one, partnerships. And there's loads of others. Sororities, brotherhoods. I mean, basically, as I said, it's infinite. I mean, it's not infinite, but like you know, like you can have consultancy. Once it's not a non-natural, once it's not a non-person, it has to be the human beings involved, not non-natural non-persons. You know, because you're just adding, you know, this other mode to feed into your polity, your state. But you need to use that in order to talk to bigger people who will dominate and will require that non-natural legal person. Yeah. So and you could, but you chose zero. So you have all these different choices that you could get. Now the obvious thing that really hits in here is that, well, then how would we grow so big? But no, that's the whole point. You wouldn't grow so big. It would be bit down to like I think it was was it Mintzberg? Is that was his name? Henry Mintzberg or something? Down to your structure in fives. Yeah, and you know the five. Let's say if you want to go with a single, let's say king, or not a king, but the guy that does the baking and how he's going to disperse this baking stuff throughout the human being mind. So he could do that because there's a purpose there, and the purpose is to create bread and to disperse the bread. Yeah. to close out necessity. That necessity being hunger. Yeah. But you chose zero. So what happens with this? It's an emergent thing. This non-person is an emergent thing. It's not like a flower that grows out, or a tree, or a human being, like two man and woman get together and make a human being that flows from what we call a natural, what we might refer to as natural law, if you like, or the natural evolution of things. It's a couple of people to get together and they create something does not exist, yeah, and which needs feeding. So on paper it has purpose, like you can say this non-natural non-person or whatever like that is here to make ice cream. But equally, the same mechanism, and it's so quick because the transition is it's the same type of transition as from the traditional grammar into, like, say, areas of science, which you can't really do because it's you can't have the VSO or SOV structures or the syntactic structures that you might try to force into scientific postulates, like E is equal to MC squared and all that. That make more sense later on. And you stick on this. So on paper it has a purpose, but effectively it can be creating bombs, creating things, making bread, but we all couch it under that, nice and cozy. Well, it's got its purpose and stuff like that, yeah. But the purpose of the purpose attached to representatives of, let's say, a non-person, a legal non-person, and somebody who is actually doing something with human purpose involved, it's an entirely different arrangement. This thing here, this other non-thing, rules the roost, and obviously it has policies which it uses to police its purpose and what it's involved in, and it has rules of conduct and rules of behaviour that you would do in any corporation, yeah. So you have the rules, the policies, and what like that, yeah. And you might be asked to agree to do. You might have to sign an NDA to say you won't do something which, in another situation, you would have done, or not to do something in another sense you would have done, or to do something in another situation you wouldn't have done. Yeah. So, but the thing is, it really is that this is actually forming and in part steering your choices, and choice is a human aspect, not a machine aspect. Yeah, and that's just computational stochasticism or whatever, all right. So you may need to, yeah. So basically, the paradigm supports the language, and the language supports the paradigm. I went through this before until somebody beats that paradigm. But you will never, with the non-person, legal non-person, which doesn't fucking exist. Yeah, as long as that maintain that paradigm within which the rules and whatever like this exist. Yeah, in another paradigm, yeah, if I'm to drag in some, let's say, and we think that the language we use today is a better language than yesterday, and better language than yesterday, there's an awful lot of junk in the way the language that we have now, because we use a lot for concepts that we can't actually see in our hand or see in our field of vision, yeah. And there's so much junk and fake junk, you get from the schools, that, Descartes and Kant translates into the school. Kuhn pointed this out, that those ideas, they just get straight as they find their way. It takes quite a bit. And then the schooling we have now, the Platonic school we have now, it's just that's just industry process. It's production, yeah, with children, what have you. Had it been an Aristotelian welfare system, with Aristotelian teaching, there's no way, there's not a chance, because it really goes to the person. And it goes to the person next to it, whether you want to express in terms of courage or one of those type of things. And I want to bring it a little bit to today's speak, that movie Divergence, where there was candor, abnegation, dauntless. Yeah, it's not. I mean, any society, any culture will have their own 5 values that they might want to see in their society. Extended out a bit more, but these would be human values, not Platonic values from 2,500 years ago, and definitely not all those hexagons and all those those pictures of hexagons and cubes and all that crack, which don't exist in the real world, but exist in Timaeus and Critias, 2,000-year-old book by Kelly, yeah? And you want to believe that, all that stuff, but that's not really allowing the child to establish their reality-based existence. You're already institutionalizing rules within that child, yeah? And I think that is a crime, yeah? A real crime, an resistance crime, yeah? So, you had all these choices, but we end up with this one here, which is all the rules. I mean, if I was working with John the Baker, could fire a trowel or fire some sort of implement at me, say, get on with the bread, and that would be that, yeah? But that's different, but because our purpose is essentially all the same, that we're there just making bread. But now your purpose is different, in a different scenario, in a different paradigm. Your purpose is to make money, yeah? Now you might feel all cozy, but a mission or a vision or something for this non-natural legal person. But you need to question the law under which that type of instrument was created. Yeah? Yeah, okay. So you obey these laws and these rules and what have you, and then debt, more debt, that's created by a non-being as well, particularly because it deals with non-being, which is the money. That 1973, all debt incurred after that, for me, is just it's just fantasy. I mean, there is no correlation, there's no correspondence between these big figures and what's on the little planet that you stand on. Yeah, it's just fantasy, that debt, and it's made by the existential zero, by an existential zero non-being, yeah, created by your state or your Companies Act or whatever like that. But Mentzberg would say that the structure in fives, like one boss, and then the next boss, and they have five, and then they have five, and they have five, and they have five, and they have five, and eventually it gets up to there's a maximum, and that's basically gives you some sort of connectivity, so that your degrees of separation don't exceed 6. Well, I know I'm just picking that figure out of my head. This degree of separation. This is what we're talking about. Your existence, if you define it in terms of your state, or if you define it in terms of a foul thing that, right. So so the debt was good. So, and with this thing, the whole thing is that this non-being, and the state, from the people, and the people who admonish the state, will, there will be some sort of within that culture that assumes or insists or mandates that you should give your will to some other thing. I have a problem with that, because that to me is a particular characteristic of something that has existed for many years now. Like in any cultures, they can couch it in any terms you like. They couch it in voodoo or black magic or something like that, or some thing that that's part of the culture, some words that they've used, or some way that they've tried to explain something that which they cannot explain. Yeah, but it's all cultural based, and the blood and their grey matter that is inherited will know this. Yeah, they know what non-being is and what being is. Yeah, because they'll recognize the spirit, and maybe they have a problem with that, perhaps. Yeah, so going back to Descartes, we're in this position 400 years old. It's not our problem. I think, therefore, Yahweh. Now, Yahweh means I am, and that's an Old Testament thing. And even though I'm not a big Old Testament fan, I'm not really. I'm not a big fan of how that Old Testament connects into Jesus of Nazareth. I have connection problems with that, because I think Jesus is connected to somebody else entirely, or some other type of aspect entirely. Yeah, I know that in Nicaea they had to do some rings and wangs, but bear in mind that this was political. Highly political, what was the way forward in 325 AD, and what Christianity as a polity was going to turn out to be, as opposed to Christianity just the existential, which in my view, is a very gentle, maybe not so much gentle, but in my view it was one of these existential breakthroughs. I mean, perhaps you wouldn't couch it like that back then. It was just enlightenment, like in Jesuit time or Jesus time, whatever. But that's how I see that came out of that. And I can explain why I believe that. And bear in mind that when I come at it, I'm going to come at it in a little bit of a cold way, not a cold, I'll be using sort of cold stuff rather than emotive stuff that, so you can decide whether I'm projecting, or you can decide whether what I've inferred from the literature, which I've put into sort of a matrix, into a sort of a picture format for you, that you might think a little bit differently, a little bit about this guy, okay, but that won't make sense. So what we do is we end up obeying the rules of this thing, this non-being, whatever like that. Taking in old language, it might be simplified, but then it doesn't have all the rubbish that we have today, with all this conception language, and a lot of the language which has been doubled up because these non-beings and these conceptions are actually robbing and they can give themselves names. Little Amazon or Brazil, Brazil and Plan Brazil. But the thing is, so I think therefore Yahweh, and Yahweh means I am. So in effect, what Descartes is saying is, I think therefore God. In other words, he thinks he can author God, and that's the problem you've got. I read the words are there, and I just use the words. Yeah. Being comes before thought. There's no, and then there are other when emotion kicks in and when instinct starts to be modified, perhaps with the beginning of reason, if we look at it in an evolutionary form. But if you set them out in the order of the vowels, it's an awful easier. It's an awful easier. So the thing is, right. So in another language, all this stuff, these policies and all these rules that you do, and all these things and these NDAs, and how you do this, like for this non-natural legal person, which doesn't really exist. It's just stranger thing, a stranger thing. But the other word, this would be worship. Yeah, worship, and you're not really supposed to worship. You're not really supposed to follow that purpose. You think, we're doing this and doing that. You're working for the non-being, and that gets the scraps profit. And these things can exist in perpetuity. Look at the banks, and look at Coca-Cola. How many generations, how many grandfathers, grandchildren has that gone through since it was first conceived, if you like? Yeah. Cocaine was the lure, I think, that in that one. Cocaine. I think food and the sort of well-being was the lure for Ireland, and the European thing. But yeah. So anyway, that's that. And I'm going to leave it at that. Is there anything else? Yeah, main event. Right. No, it's not. Yeah, okay. And we admit to being in the already crisis. Yeah. So we admit these things. It's the crisis, So it's not a crisis, but we create a crisis with this non-being. Because it really is, and it's mucking in with humans, and this non-being and this whole thing. But if you want to worship it, it's your fucking choice.